Hello and welcome back to the Day Luna Human Design Podcast with your host, Dana and Shayna. This is an episode that is dedicated to our projectors because we haven't done one in a while, a solo episode with just us two, talking specifically about projectors. And the theme of recognition has just been coming up for me on new levels recently. And, recognition is such an important theme in the life of a projector. We really wanted to dedicate an entire episode to demystifying recognition. What does it mean? What does it look like in our lives? How do we navigate it? How do we differentiate this dopamine hit, like low hanging fruit, like junk food version of recognition versus this lasting, sustainable, true, and authentic recognition in our lives? So we wanted to dedicate this episode to diving into that topic.
Yes. And I feel like, for a lot of us here, a lot of our listeners, you might be on your projector journey for a few years now. And especially, for the projectors listening, because when you find out about human design, oftentimes as a projector, you want to dive into all the things and you want to learn everybody's charts in your whole life and focus on, that whole rabbit hole of learning human design. And the recognition piece around your strategy of waiting for the invitation is so important because it's not like something that you understand and master and like you're done, right? It's not like awareness now sets you free. It's literally something that pops up in every conversation, in every interaction, in every new challenge or new group of people or a new thing that you're putting out into the world. There's this element of, am I recognized here? Does this feel like healthy recognition or not? And it's always you gauging it, right? Like you're the one who's going to know what healthy recognition feels like in your body or not. And it's a daily practice, if you will, depending on how many people you're around and the type of work that you're doing and the creations that you're working on. But for me, I definitely, it changes conversation to conversation, right? Like you might be super recognized within, your partnership or with your best friend or with your parent or boss or whoever, but then the topic changes to something random or something personal or something different and you're not recognized to give that insight or that opinion or whatever that is, and you say it and then you get into bitterness and then there's a whole like bitter dynamic going on in your own personal world. So noticing that, understanding how to work with that, understanding how to nurture your recognition is huge and one of the most important things as a projector.
Yeah, so in this episode, we're going to talk about what authentic recognition is and what it's not. We're also going to give some tips that you can start applying to cultivate more authentic recognition in your life. But let's just start off right from the beginning. What is recognition? I think it's so interesting that in human design, we have these words like for generators, responding, which is such a simple word, for projectors, recognition. But the more we think about it, we're like, wait, what does recognition mean? So I wanted to just read the dictionary.com definition of it. Recognition is the identification of something as having been previously seen, heard, or known. The perception of something as existing or true, having that realization. The acknowledgement of something as valid, right? So when a projector is recognized by someone, it feels like they can actually see these aspects of you. And by them having that perception, that level of perception to really see you, you feel like you're getting validation that it exists, right? There is like, they see this thing in you. And as a projector, we have such a blind spot when it comes to seeing ourselves, even though we're so good at seeing other people. When someone does recognize you, it feels like this beautiful gift. Like you honestly get this dopamine rush in your body when someone sees this thing in you because you're getting this external validation or appreciation for something that really resonates with you on a deeper level. And what we really wanted to talk about here is that recognition is so important, with projectors having their not self theme of bitterness, like the two main reasons that bitterness comes up in a projector's life, we always like to say, One is that you're exhausted, you've been overworking yourself, and you're tired. The other main reason is that you're not being recognized. You feel unseen, you feel unheard, you feel underappreciated, you feel invisible to those people in your life.
Yeah, and that invisible feeling, a lot of times can manifest itself as being misunderstood or feeling misunderstood because you're not being recognized for your true intentions, for your true insight, for what you were really trying to say. And so understanding the ways that you can recognize yourself and when you're being recognized or not is so important because you can't force people to recognize you. You can't push people to recognize you. And it comes off as really repelling. And that is a lot of times what projectors end up doing is trying to force recognition. Like, no, but you don't understand. This is really like important. Like, this is why I know these things. This is why, you know, you should trust me or whatever that might look like. It can feel natural to want to force that recognition because you're just trying to like clarify y- if you're feeling misunderstood or invisible or like really trying to redirect that light of what you really mean back onto yourself, if that makes sense. Because when you're being unrecognized, the knee jerk reaction is it's like, when we say the word recognized, it's like this big overarching word, but in a conversation, right? Like a real life example, you're talking to a friend and then you tell them, like, oh my gosh, you should take this supplement or you should, meet with this therapist or have you heard of, the different attachment styles? It sounds like you're leaning into this one, right? In your toxic relationship. And the whole conversation, you felt like things are flowing, things are good. I feel really comfortable with this person. And then you feel them like shut down or become defensive or put up a wall. And it's that instant feeling of like, hold on, like, no, that's not like, don't put the wall up, don't be defensive, like, see me, recognize me. And so it's coming from a genuine place, right? A lot of times. Sometimes it's not. Like sometimes you can be in a really unrecognized place, in a really unrecognized job, and you're just kind of screaming for attention. That's kind of what it comes across as, and it's super repelling. But if you're already kind of honed in on being around people who recognize you, it can switch in a second with a conversation. And then it's noticing, like, oh, am I scrambling to force someone to recognize me right now? And it's spinning me into bitterness and it's repelling them away from me and it's creating this whole dynamic. Can I stop? And that is hard to do. And it's not about being perfect, right? It's just noticing like, oh, that's why that energy fell off. That's why that was a weird conversation. Was because I was pushing like a annoying little mosquito in somebody's aura and I wasn't recognized.
Right. And I feel like that's the first thing. If it's kind of a hard pill to swallow, but I feel like as two projectors ourselves, we can say that it's really empowering to swallow that pill, that you cannot push other people to recognize you, right? You can't force anyone to do anything. You can't force someone to be hungry and want food, right? And so just accepting that actually frees you. And just being aware of the fact that when you push harder, when someone is kind of retracting back from you, it comes off as repelling. It's the opposite effect of what you want. So just knowing that is gives you a lot of power actually. It gives your peace back and it helps you to stop wasting energy where your energy is not meaning to flow or is not intended to flow. And definitely when I'm like just to give an example, when I'm flying on a plane and I sit next to someone and they're like, "So, where do you live?" and start doing the whole small talk thing, I'm always kind of sentence by sentence taking out my recognition thermometer and seeing, okay, am I recognized to be more honest and more authentic in the next sentence or not? So, I'll start by being like, oh, I live, in the desert and my husband's a rock climbing guide. And if they're like, oh, that's really cool. And I can really feel that they see that that is cool, they recognize it, then you can go one step further of like, yeah, I own my own business. Like, oh, that's cool. What's it about? But then if at any point I feel them I say what I am or I say, answer my question, but then they their eyes kind of go blank. Like it's like it didn't register. They didn't hear it. They didn't see it. They didn't take it in. It just is like you can feel immediately. And then I kind of stop at that. I'm like, great, we can just have a surfacey conversation where this conversation can be over, but I don't need to push them to understand me or recognize me. And like, if we keep going and I feel this recognition deepening, they see me on deeper levels with each new authentic thing I share about them, about myself, they continue to receive it and recognize it. If that happens, like I've gotten in the most beautiful conversations on planes ever. Like just recently, I flew by myself and I met these two women that we became instant BFFs, and they didn't know about human design, but they were into astrology. And by the end of the conversation, we were literally talking about neutrinos and mycelium web networks and like our partners and like motherhood and like all of these things. And we stayed in contact to this day. We text each other every day now. And that's an example of a time where I was totally recognized. I got to be my full self. It was so beautiful. It's such a gift. And I love that. But there's other plane rides where I'm like, okay, this person does not recognize me. This new thing I shared, they didn't see it. And so I'm just going to stop and be okay with that. And the difference there is enjoying when that recognition is there and allowing yourself to feel that free flowing creativity that happens for a projector when you're recognized, but also not needing it, not being
Mm.
thirsty about it, being accepting of the fact that sometimes it'll be there and sometimes it won't. And that's okay.
Yeah, and not everybody that you meet needs to recognize you. Not everybody
Yeah.
that you know needs to recognize you. Like this example with a plane, right? It's easier to be able to see how you can just quickly be like, "Okay, great. Like they don't need to recognize me. I'm never going to see this person again," right? But if you're at a party or a baby shower or an event and it's like somebody in your life like a friend of a friend or a coworker or an aunt or uncle or somebody like that in your life that you know them, but literally sentence by sentence you're sensing, is there actually recognition there or not, and being okay with the fact that your aunt doesn't recognize you. Like not every single person in your life needs to. You don't need to have that thirstiness that comes across as so repelling, and like that need to prove yourself of like, you need to know me. um you don't need every single person to recognize you. They will when it's their time, but once again, you can't force them to, and you're not meant to. You are meant to be surrounded by people who recognize you without you having to like drag them to the water to drink, if you will. So I think that was a huge lesson for me, was that sentence by sentence and then being like, cool, like just not, I don't need to push that. And of course, now I've gotten to a place where that feels really good because it's like that, you know how there's like FOMO, but then there's JOMO, like the joy of missing out. Like I have very limited energy. And so I'm like not trying to talk to anyone on the plane, but also like recognized or not. But also like if I'm meeting someone new or if I know someone and we start having a conversation where they're asking me like, what do you do? Or what are you interested in right now? Or how has motherhood, like pregnancy been for you? Right? Even in that place, so many people are asking me that right now. And as I'm explaining what pregnancy's been like, I'm still going sentence by sentence of like, do they actually want to hear my whole fucking journey? Or are they just like making small talk and they just want to like, are they wanting to go that deep with me? Or are they just wanting to kind of connect in a little brief sentence? And that is also a part of recognition, because if I'm trying to get them to go, listen to my whole experience and go really deep with them, but they're not that interested, I'm going to leave that conversation feeling really, really bitter, because I'm going to feel misunderstood and I'm going to feel like I don't matter or that they don't get me. And once again, that's recognition, right? So there's so many places where this pops up, and being okay with the fact that like not every single person is meant to recognize you, I think to me was a huge weight off, and it kept me from wasting my precious energy, because it is precious and it is being stored in reserves for more important shit than like a conversation.
Yeah, I love that. And so the next point that I really wanted to talk about with recognition is that recognition is really at its highest level to be recognizing you for who you are and not what you do. Because as a projector, while you are here to do things, of course, it's not the primary focus of your energy and of your time here because of the you being a projector. You're much more here to see and to share your insight and to share your advice or tweaks or guidance. So that realm of how you see the world or who you are as an essence, what your wisdom is, that's kind of the main area that recognition is really meant to be on. And it's interesting because I think in my life before discovering that I was a projector, I think this applies to both of us. I would get a lot of recognition for the things that I did because I was pretending to be a man gen and people pleasing my way through life and being a really hard worker. Like in high school, I was taking two times more classes than a normal person. I was literally coming to school at 6 o'clock in the morning and leaving at 6 o'clock at night, if not later. And I was doing all these things and I would get a lot of recognition for the things that I would do or the accomplishments that I would achieve. And that was like this low hanging fruit version of recognition where it's like this dopamine rush. It feels good to be seen. But at the end of the day, you're being seen for what you're doing instead of what you're seeing. And it doesn't have a sustainable and lasting effect, right? Once again, like junk food recognition. And instead, when there were people in my life that would really see who I am as a being, my wisdom, my insight, the unique way that I see things, those were the people that I felt like I had this sustainable flow of positive energy with. Those were the people that I felt like were really aligned for me in my life. And in our former careers, like this was the main thing that was really dragging me down was I was really good at what I was doing. I was working as a behavioral therapist for children on the autism spectrum, and people were complimenting me and wanting to give me raises, and all of that stoked my ego and allowed me to eat this recognition junk food. But there was this underlying feeling that when I would crash from those compliments and I would go home and I would be still just like, it feels off. I still feel invisible in some way. Like I still feel like they're looking at me, but they're looking right through me instead of seeing my essence. And it felt very unfulfilling to me. And it felt really trapping. And like I felt a lot of bitterness from that place. And all of that was because I was getting that recognition for what I do instead of the things that I was able to see or my unique wisdom or unique perspective as a projector.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because, when you don't recognize yourself, you get the high or the junk food high from recognition and compliments anywhere you can because you're kind of like searching for like, oh, is that who I am? Am I a really good behavioral therapist? Am I a really good manager? For me, it was, am I really good at putting out fires and I can take on anything and accomplish and bulldoze anything? Like, is that who I am? I'm getting all of this recognition. And so I'm getting kind of high on that. But then once again, at the end of the day, it's like, gosh, but if I had to do that for the rest of my life, like that's not me. That's not it, but I don't know what is it, but everybody else is telling me that I'm so good at this and that they're really seeing my talents here, but it just doesn't feel like me at the end of the day. So that's why, in our projector masterclass, we really talk about how to recognize yourself and going on the journey of figuring out who you are and building your lighthouse and really following those fascinations. So if being a projector is new to you and you're listening to this, we recommend taking our projector masterclass or reading our book, Your Human Design, to really get a grasp on how to see yourself as a projector because when you don't see yourself, other people aren't seeing you either. And you're just living compliment by compliment, little bit of recognition scrap by recognition scrap into an inevitable ditch of burnout. So you can find those resources. We have the Projector Masterclass in our Besties membership, actually, along with all the other type masterclasses. It's a really great, valuable resource, our Besties library, and that's only $33 a month. So if you wanted to go watch them all, you could, and then you could, leave Besties, which like probably shouldn't be promoting that, but it's the truth. You could, the smart thing to do, but you won't want to leave because Besties is so amazing. But anyways, also in our book, you can find some of that information, but seeing yourself as a projector, you're here to see, you're here to guide. And so that also includes you're here to see when you're not being recognized or when you are, but it's not actually for who you are and your true essence.
Yeah, and one of the things that's really confusing, it's like a conundrum about being a projector, is that you have this aura that is focused and penetrating. It penetrates into the other. You are designed to be able to deeply, deeply see the other and to penetrate into systems in that way. And that is something that is such a special talent energetically, right? It's what makes you such an amazing guide to be able to guide the energy use of others because you have that aura. But we have that blind spot when it comes to seeing ourselves because of that, right? And so, in very traditional human design, it's like they'll talk about how being a projector, like you need to be invited for everything and you have to just wait and wait and wait until someone invites you. And while that is true, if we take that too literally, I feel like it can be very disempowering. If you're a projector and you're just sitting around forever waiting for other people to recognize the real you and give you invitations that are really aligned for you and you're not doing any inner work, it's going to take forever. It might happen. There might be these angel people in your life that really see you, and that's beautiful when that does happen, but it's disempowering to feel like you have to only wait for other people's external validation or recognition to start seeing yourself. Instead, as two projectors ourselves, we have found that it is extremely important to take the initiative to start loving yourself first, believing in yourself first, getting curious about who are you, right? What are your gifts? What are your fascinations? All of that stuff. And when you take that initiative to start recognizing yourself and building that level of self love, it allows you to let go of your obsession on external validation or other people giving you that recognition. And ironically, that is the easy energy that then calls in that recognition. If we are obsessed about other people and what they think about us and what they want from us, we're going to be living our lives in a very disempowered place overall. And if instead we're focused on loving ourselves, knowing ourselves, taking the initiative to be our number one supporter in our life, then from that place, looking at how do I want to help other people? How do I want to guide other people, right? That self-love always has to be the foundation of it. And I think that's a huge thing that projectors miss because our aura is designed to see the other. So while it's so important to develop a skill or to master a system that can help you guide other people and understand people's differences, it's all going to fall apart if and have this air of bitterness underneath it if it doesn't start with you recognizing yourself and validating yourself first and foremost.
Yes, and that piece is so important because otherwise, like you said, it is hollow and you become reliant on other people. You're literally reliant on them telling you, why you should love yourself and what's good about you and what they see in you, but you're not actually fully seeing the full depths of who you are and what that is. And I see so many projectors out there who are just waiting for their life to start, who are just waiting for Prince Charming to come in and sweep them off their feet, or who are just waiting for that perfect job to give them that perfect opportunity, or for that talent scout to come and spot them and then book them on a show or book them on a, thing. And it's all coming from this place of superficially wanting somebody to love you, but underneath, you don't actually love yourself. And that self-worth piece is the most important for projectors because if you don't love yourself, like truly like who you are and asking those deeper questions and like facing your demons and actually really navigating the reasons why maybe you have low self-worth or you're not loving yourself, then every single relationship that you have, every single job that you do, every single passion project that you decide to maybe try out is going to have this air of, am I even good at this? Am I even worthy for this? Is this even right for me? And you're not going to be fully committed to that thing because it has a weak foundation. So if you're just in the place of building your lighthouse, what we would say, but really starting to see yourself as a projector, I want to encourage you not to rush that process with the first compliment you get or the first, little bit of recognition that you receive, but to really spend some time asking, like, why is this thing fascinating to me? Like, what within it? What within that? Like, really asking, like, for me, why is human design fascinating to me? And that leads me to, because it brings liberation and because it's so expansive, it can be applied to anything. And why is that fascinating? Why is expansion fascinating to me? Because it's limitless and it makes me feel like anything is possible, right? Why is liberation fascinating to me? Well, that brings me back to my ancestry and also brings me to every single person on the planet who's trapped in their minds. Like, why is that fascinating, right? So you can keep going and you get to this place where you just feel so in love with your mind and so in love with the way that you see the world. But I wanted to give that as an example because you can say, like, go on that rabbit hole, but, like, you only go, like, 2 steps in and you're like, "Okay, so I'm gonna be a nutritionist, and so maybe I'm good at that." And then one person tells you, like, "You're good at that," and then you keep going there, but it has this sense of superficialness because you didn't keep going to ask yourself, like, what within nutrition? Is it the fact that our government doesn't provide good nutrition? Is it the fact that you feel empowered around your body when you're eating healthy? Is it the literal, like, plants and their medicine? Like, really asking yourself those questions, that's going to help you to fall in love with yourself. And then when somebody comes along who doesn't recognize you or who doesn't get it or who is genuinely not interested in asking you about yourself and what you do, it doesn't shake you at all because you literally don't need their insight in your lighthouse or in your castle at all because they never were a part of it to begin with.
Yes, I love that. And, we talk so much about sacral beings and their body being the main leading force in their life. As a projector, it really is your psychological mind that leads you. So when we talk about fascination, it's that mental curiosity that just feels like this magnetism. You feel your aura wanting to dip into that rabbit hole. And if you can really fall in love with that process for yourself first, that is where you create so much magnetism of other people inviting you to then get to share that with them and guide them and share that resource. Whereas if you're just taking the first step of following your fascinations and then looking around and saying, who likes that I'm doing this and who wants me, it's not going to be sustainable or very successful. You might have some success if you're doing that, but it won't be sustainable and lasting and real for you. So we really do recommend kind of going on that journey of all of the different projector processes that we discuss in our book or in that masterclass. And then once you've done that and you've really gone on that journey internally, then it's so important to allow yourself to be seen. A lot of projectors that we know feel really bitter because they feel like people don't see them or recognize their gifts. But it's like you have told literally not one soul that you're learning this thing. You haven't let anyone see you doing this. And so a lot of projectors get tripped up. How can I let people see me while I'm still waiting for the invitation? That is an art form and it is 100% possible. And so this is where we're talking about waiting for the invitation being, if it's too literal, it stops you. Once you discover what you're fascinated in and you have your viewpoint, it's time to talk about it. It's time to share it. It's time to put yourself out there and not hide because only if people see the real and authentic you can they even recognize you. That feels vulnerable because you're kind of putting yourself out there first, right? You're doing that sentence by sentence thing we were talking about. Sometimes it feels like dipping your toe in the water. And if the water's warm, then you can dip your foot in the water. And if the water's warm, you can start wading in as a projector. So, in general, when you're sharing yourself with people or your fascinations or whatever it is you're learning, sometimes you will feel like you're kind of like dipping a toe in and seeing how open they are. But as long as you're really staying in your zone, you're saying, this is why I'm fascinated in this thing. This is what I'm excited about. You don't need an invitation to talk about yourself. You just really want to make sure that energetically you're staying on your side of the street and you're not pushing or forcing it into their life. Like you need to look up this thing until that recognition and invitation is there.
Yeah. So, one thing I really like to recommend for projectors is once you have that viewpoint, like Dana was saying, and you're fascinated with something and you're so lit up by it and you can't you like want to talk about it, right? Um having something like social media, like a new social media that you create with the handle where you literally, you're not thinking, oh, my aunt Karen follows me on here and now I'm going to be talking every day on my story about, sexual karma, right? Like a place where it feels like it's safe. It's completely safe for you to just talk about the things that you want, and the people who follow you have invited you and recognize you. Um, that's always a really easy, free place to start. And of course, you're going to have 0 followers, or you might share it on your personal Instagram and be like, follow me over here if you want tips on, overcoming your sexual trauma or whatever it is. And then they can. But having something, whether that's a podcast or a blog or social media of some kind, a TikTok, where you feel energetically like you can share yourself and you're not going to be repelling anyone who didn't invite you, because all of the people that are consuming it are choosing to consume it versus like they were already following you before, if you will. So with that energy, I've seen a lot of times some projectors being like, okay, I'm going to share it all right now on my platform, like completely pivot. And everyone kind of has this energy of like, wait, what? Like, I had no idea. Like, this is shocking. And then they're like, I put myself out there and now I'm not being seen or being recognized fully. So there's different dynamics. Like Dana said, it is an art form, but the goal that you're looking for is sharing yourself in a container that is free for you to fully talk about all the things that you're interested in without necessarily having to constantly engage it. So for us, it was the podcast, right? And then that led to the Instagram and it led to all the different things that we do. But it's going to be different for you. What's the way that feels easy? What's the way that feels expansive and feels good? Use your authority, all of that stuff. But the recognition piece, conversation by conversation, it is going to be dipping your toe in the water and seeing sentence by sentence. And of course, that can be a really great place to start too. Like just talking about with your partner or your best friend or your coworker, like, yeah, I've been learning a lot about karma and it's been really interesting to me and it's helped me in so many different ways. If you're keeping it on your side of the street and not saying, so you should do this, then it's like you don't need to wait for that invitation to talk about yourself, to talk about the things that you're interested in and fascinated in. You're meant to share yourself. You're just not then saying, okay, but now you do it and let me see what happens.
Yeah, and if you're meeting someone new, maybe you can share it with them, and if you feel their eyes go blank, they did not see it, they did not register, it's like, "Okay, I shared it, I'm gonna move on." You know what I mean? You don't have to keep going further, like, "No, you have to see how much I'm in love with this thing," right? Going back to kind of that very first point that we were talking about here, and just to give you all an example, when Shayna and I were first learning about human design, we were in love with human design, we still are to this day, but we were on an airplane just reading books together about human design. And I am not joking, maybe 5 to 6 people on the plane ride stopped us and said, "Hey, girl, sorry to interrupt you. What are you guys reading?" And we're like, "Oh, we're reading this book on human design." And then we'd wait and that's it. And then if they asked us further questions, "Wow, what is that? I've never heard of that before." And a lot of people by the end of the sentence, they're like, "Do you guys have a website? Can we learn from this from you? Like, where do I buy this book? I'd love to have conversations on this. Do you teach workshops?" Like people were really asking us and coming up to us just because they could see us reading a book. So I wanted to share that story because that's another way that you can be out in the world, reading about human design or working on a human design creative project in the park somewhere. And someone might come up to you and talk to you about it. Versus if you're or the same thing, right? If you do that and then you share it on your Instagram, share that you're reading this book, that's a great way too. So I just wanted to share those real life examples because I am not joking. Like that shit works. And if you're feeling under recognized, underappreciated, undervalued in your life, do this process for yourself for real. And then when you're ready and you've done all of the inner work, allow people to see you authentically and courageously and see where that takes you.
Yes. And I do want to just add, when in doubt, talking about like literally just what you're doing and what you're interested in is always the way to go. So, like the difference, right, between saying, here's 10 tips to change your life with human design. Do these 10 things, right? On your Instagram where everyone you ever met follows you. That's like literally they're going to come across that and be like, whoa, don't tell me what to do. I don't even know what you're talking about. But if you say, I just learned these 10 tips and holy shit, it's changed my life, then people are like, oh, that's interesting. How has it changed your life? Like, you're not directing that at me. You're literally just talking about yourself. And there's a lean in that happens versus like a, whoa, hold on. I wasn't expecting you to come into my aura and like tell me what to do. So just noticing that energetic difference, that's it. That's all it is when it comes to being seen. Is there the pushiness or is there the just letting yourself be seen? And then, of course, if you're in a space where literally people recognize you, then great, share the 10 tips that people can do today to change their life with human design, right? Um, so, yeah, I think that that's maybe a really like we're using human design as an example, but you can apply that to like literally whatever thing that you're fascinated in and then letting yourself be seen within that.
Yes, I love that. And within this process of, going on this journey to build your own lighthouse and let people see you, something that I think is extremely important that projectors probably don't want to hear is that it's important to be patient about this, right? You're not following your fascinations for external validation if you're doing it correctly. You're following them because you are fascinated by it and it fills you up to follow that and to learn about the world and to see the world in your unique way. And so, if you start creating something or start sharing something like this example Shayna was giving us, starting a brand new Instagram where you can tell people, I'm sharing this here. If you want to follow me and learn about it, you're invited, but you come to me. If you decide to do that and you only get, let's say, 100 followers after doing it for a year, you really have to be honest with yourself. Am I doing this for the right reasons? If I love doing it and it's my creative outlet to express my viewpoint and my insights, and the 100 people that are here following me recognize me and I love learning too and are engaged with me, like if that is all real for you, then that is a huge success. And out of 100 people that follow you, guess what? If you start a container that's a group coaching or a group workshop with 10 people, you have 10 times the amount of people that you need following you. So please do not get discouraged by the external validation that's showing up. I think one of our biggest keys to success with Day Luna was that we literally didn't give a fuck what anyone thought. We didn't care who invited us. We didn't care. Like, we gave ourselves permission to just do it for the right reasons, which is that we're fascinated in it. We love it. We're sharing because it's aligned for us. And we didn't put pressure on the external to catch up so quickly. That's important. That patience is so important. And as a projector, we are efficient beings. We want to just get to our success already. But there's a natural unfolding that happens. And when you're being too hard on yourself, you're just falling right back into that external validation trap that we talked about from the beginning of this episode. So having that patience and that self-love, like, it applies in all of these different angles and all of these different ways. So being okay with once again, people not recognizing you, being okay, being invisible to some people, being okay if you only have 100 followers, like, all of that is a form of self confidence and of self love. And if what you're doing is aligned for you, you have to just trust that things will unfold in the way that they're meant to, in the timing they're meant to.
Yes, I love it. So, just to solidify everything here that we've kind of talked about, the tips for cultivating authentic recognition in our lives. The first one is working on loving yourself first. That has to be the foundation. And the word love feels like so overused and it almost doesn't mean anything. Like, love yourself. It's like, okay, cool, I do. Now what? Right? Like, really loving yourself looks like really looking at yourself, really being okay with other people looking at you and talking about your wounds and that confidence that comes when you don't care what other people think about you because you know what you think about you and you love yourself, right? Working on loving yourself first and foremost. And then number two, using your projector magic, recognizing others from a place of like your true fascinations without an expectation in return. So like your projector magic really is being able to see people, being able to see projects and systems and whatever that thing is that you're so fascinated into, like that penetrating order that you have, it's magic. You're meant to have it. People need that. They want that in their lives. It's just, of course, are you recognized to give it? And then if you are, great. Like have that deep conversation with that friend. Have that creative connection with that person or that client or that audience that's really wanting to go into that zone with you. Like you are meant to have that wisdom and that penetrating aura.
And I wanted to say here with this projector magic, being able to recognize people, projectors are incredible at giving really specific and meaningful compliments to other people in that like perfect moment where it can just change that person's life to receive. That is such a gift. Never underestimate how powerful that is. And I find a lot of times I might not have the level of recognition or the invitation to give someone advice, but there is that recognition there for me to give them a really powerful and loving compliment. And when you do that, as a projector, when you see another person, that's how you see yourself. You see the way that you see others. And that gives you even more self love for who you are. It's just about making sure that you keep it in that authentic zone and you're not just giving someone a compliment because now they owe you something or they're going to invite you in something. So it has to just be a really pure and genuine intention. But use your projector magic and see the gift that you are to other people. You seeing that is then going to create that authentic recognition that comes from other people. The third point here is let people see you while you're waiting for the invitation. So, we really talked about this with social media, with going out into the world. Really make sure that you're not hiding your true self or hiding parts of yourself. One of the big unlocking moments for us in our journeys, we stopped hiding in the spiritual closet. Like when we were in work, we were not talking about all of the fascinating things we were learning. And then we were feeling like, why does no one recognize me? And when we started just voicing that more, letting people see the full spectrum of who we were, everything started changing. So let yourself be seen for who you are. Just make sure that you're in that realm, in that energetic zone of waiting for the recognition, waiting for the invitation.
Yes. And then the last point is stop wasting your precious energy where it is not recognized. This is what I was mentioning before. You don't have unlimited energy. So if you're not recognized by somebody, great. Like amazing. That's okay. They're not aligned for you in that moment. They might come around later or they might not. So if you have a romantic breakup or a friendship breakup, if that means that you're being alone for a little bit, that's great. Use that time to rest, use that time to study what fascinates you, use that time to recognize yourself, and then share yourself in the places where it feels safe to share what's interesting and what's fascinating to you and what's lighting you up right now. Focusing on the people that feel really good, like feel like they recognize you and where it's safe for you to share those things, and noticing when in the conversation it shifts and now you're not recognized and not being, bitter about it, but instead being like, okay, cool, great. That wasn't recognized. Maybe it will be in the future. I know I was right, but that's okay. They don't need to know I was right because I'm going to come back to focusing on myself, recognizing myself. And these steps, especially in interpersonal relationships, when it comes to like the hardest place where it is to wait for the invitation, which is with friends and family and giving them advice or unsolicited advice. um, these steps kind of repeat in a circle where it's like, oh, okay, I'm so recognized. And now I've said something and now I'm feeling bitter and I'm repelling them. And I need to come back to step number one of loving myself and recognizing myself and focusing on the things that I feel really recognized in and seeing maybe the fact that I am bitter, that is recognizing yourself. And so you go through those steps again and have that compassion, knowing that you're not meant to be perfect. You're going to say things that repel people. You're going to feel like you have to force someone to recognize you at times and in certain conversations and dynamics. And that's okay. You're not meant to be the perfect person to be worthy enough to be someone's best friend or someone's partner or someone's whatever. It's that's that self-love piece, that compassion piece of like, okay, I can trust that my close relationships aren't going to abandon me if I'm not perfect or if I repel them for a week or a conversation, right? Like, if I can check myself and know, like, oh, I was repelling and now I need to back off and I need to come back to my own zone. That phrase that I've said a few times on the podcast, not my circus, not my monkeys, that really helps me to come back to step number one here. Because all of this is, I feel, in my life easier to apply to work and to sharing my genius, but it's harder to apply in like my relationship with my husband or with Dana as my business partner, my best friend, or with all of my close friends and family. I'll notice it slip at like one conversation dinner where everything was going great. And then I said that one thing, like, why do you still have a relationship with that person? And it's like, oh, that was not invited. So just kind of knowing this is an ever evolving journey. It's going to be getting easier and easier, and you'll be noticing the energetics easier and easier. But as the projector, you see things so deeply, it has to start with you seeing yourself first.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so true. Like, even in our human design journeys and our journeys into becoming more of who we are, more authentic, like, we've been in our human design experiment for over 7 years now. And it's really interesting to see the way our lives are literally completely different from when we started 1000%. Like, the amount of recognition we have in our lives is really, really beautiful and special. I'm so grateful for it. It's such a huge part of our success is to feel like our community and our clients really get us and honor our wisdom, and they see us, and like, I don't feel invisible. I feel like a real girl. Like, I feel like seen, right? And that feeling is so beautiful to have, and we have such an abundance of it. And like, for example, when we're at our retreat in Mexico, like, peak all-time recognition where we all recognize each other, to be in that bubble is just an ecstatic state, a bliss state. And then for us, then we come home, and then I come back to like my family and a family emergency with my in-laws in a state where I am just completely unrecognized, not seen at all, invisible again. So even though I've come all of this way and I've changed my life and I have this recognition and success in my life, it's not like now I'm just living like this is not a problem for me anymore. Like, I don't have to navigate when I'm not recognized. Like, you'll always have places where you're deeply recognized and places where you're not. It never gets like easier and like now you don't have to think about it anymore. As we were saying in the beginning, it's a day to day, conversation to conversation, sentence in the conversation by sentence in the conversation thing. And, when you can embrace that, it actually makes it all more fun. It makes it like living the projector game. And I just wanted to highlight that because I feel like sometimes people see your end result, at the end of a 7-year cycle, and they're like, wow, if I could just get there, my life will be perfect and I won't have to deal with these things anymore. It's like, no, this is a navigation of every new octave of your life. And yes, our life has changed so much. I'm so grateful for that. To have the level of recognition we have now is amazing, but we still are dealing with these same things because it's the way that you navigate. So embracing it wherever you are is the most helpful thing, because honestly, it doesn't really matter if you are on one octave or the other. It's the same internal process of you taking empowerment over your life. You are empowered to change. And as a projector, that can be so scary. Like, am I really dependent on other people to feel empowered? No, you're not. And we are here to be the voices that stand for that, because I feel like there is some misinformation in the way that things are communicated in the human design space around projectors. So you're empowered to make this change and embrace this process of navigating this, because it will be a lifelong journey no matter what octave you're on.
Yes, I love that. So I just want to encourage you to not waste your energy where it's not needed. We have even podcast guests that we have come on who don't recognize us. And by the end of the conversation, they do more, like they recognize us more. And so many people have like DM'd us. So many of our listeners are like, oh my gosh, I could tell in the beginning that he or she didn't recognize you. And then by the end of it, they came around and they were like, "Oh shit, okay, these aren't just like two dumb podcast bitches that like, superficially like don't know anything. Like we actually know things. I mean, do we? Does anyone? But it's just so interesting, like not even being offended in the slightest, not being bitter in the slightest, but just telling from a first conversation, like, first few sentences, like, oh, okay, I'm dipping my toe in a little bit slower here and I'm avoiding some of these other things that I know I'm definitely not recognized in right now. And that's okay. And maybe by the end of the convo, that'll be gone. Maybe it won't. And like, I literally don't care. I don't need to waste my energy there. So I just want to encourage you to save your energy, projector queens and kings and beings. Um, because it's yours. It's yours to give away. Choosing where you give it to is all that's your freedom. That's your empowerment.
Yes. So thank you so much for tuning into this episode. It felt really fun for us to get to dive into the projector life path and share our own examples here. So we'd love to hear from you how this episode landed for you. You can reach out to us on our Instagram, which is at dayluna. You can find all of our offerings on our website, daylunalife.com. That's where you can find our human design reader training. If you're feeling the call to learn more about human design and become a human design reader, that's where you can find all of our other offerings, trainings, videos. Like Shayna was saying, you can watch the Projector Masterclass type video in our membership, which is called Your Human Design Besties. And it is only $33 a month. So it's a really good value for a really affordable price. If you want to dive in there and learn a bunch from different videos and do meditations, do tappings, meet with us for a live ceremony. Sometimes we even do live Q&As. We would love to see you in there. It's always so nourishing to get to share this human design journey in that intimate space.
Yes. So we will see you soon. daylunalife.com at dayluna. And leave us a review if you love this podcast or if you like this podcast, I should say. Because we love to hear from you. We read every single one. We do a happy dance. We literally makes our whole day. So if you're feeling called to share some love back, that's a great way to do so. Otherwise, reach out to us anytime. We'd love to chat. And we hope that you have a beautiful, amazing, self-love, self-recognized rest of your week. Thank you for tuning in with us today. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe to follow along and learn more about human design.